Yeah, and I mean, when you think about communities and NFTs and culture, like, do you think there's a big difference between like the culture around crypto punks and the culture around art blocks' first shop squiggles, and then you have the DAO side or friends of benefits? Like, how do you judge the culture and community around all these projects? Like, what makes you think that one will last longer than the other, or at its infancy, one has the potential to be large?
It's a really tough question. It's one that I try and figure out every day. I would say that the sense of ownership and responsibility that people take over expanding the likeness of that project directly correlates to its long term success. So it's one thing to change an avatar to your profile picture. It's another thing to spend your free time contributing actively to that community to make it better over the long term. Something like Friends with Benefits, we now have close to 100 contributors that are going out of their way to spend meaningful time and effort building products and services. I think this is very different from buying a PFP project. And so when I look through the weeds of something like CryptoPunks, Bored Apes, Art Blocks, I start to look under the hood at, is this just a speculation game? Are people here to make a quick flip? Or is there a larger precedent here where people want to come together and expand the likeness of this project? And are there working groups being established to make that a reality? If that is the case, and I start to notice that through the weeds, there are highly competent people working on very sophisticated internet communities, I'm going to invest all my time and effort to make sure that I understand that, because I think there's something extremely, extremely valuable there.
No, I'm totally with you, man. And do you expect everyone to be a builder? Like, let's say I buy a CryptoPunk, let's say I buy a Squiggle, let's say I buy XYZ NFT. Like, in your mind, like, do I have to be out here like grinding, building the community, or is there a market here that could just be buyers?
I think there's a huge market that's only buyers. I would say 1 to 5% of every community is where the builders exist. I think the goal of operators and people creating communities is to make that percentage as high as possible. But realistically, the typical breakdown I see amongst these groups is 90% passive participants, people who buy an asset and hold it. They never contribute more than simply like looking in a Discord server every now and then. 9% of like kind of on the fence, maybe I'll contribute here or there. And then 1% people like actively contributing on a day to day basis. And I think the success of these projects is highly correlated to that top 10%. So, how much of that top 10% is actually actively contributing? And the more you can push that needle towards it being higher towards the 10% side, I think the more you're going to see success on the token side as well.
Yeah, you're right, man. I mean, there's always a market to buy NFTs, but I'm always, so it was kind of like a dumb question on my part, but I'm always concerned with what percent is actually building.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that the reality is most people don't want to build. Most people don't know how to build. They still see crypto as this giant speculative game. I think in a market like today, we have a bunch more buyers than we do sellers. I think if one prominent cultural leader from Instagram posts about an NFT series, you will start to see buyers of all calibers flooding in simply to be a part of that. They have no intention of doing anything beyond buying that asset and selling it later. But I believe that speculation is just a way to channel excitement in a project. And when you start to look under the hood about why these things are getting speculative interest and demand and whatnot, I think you'll start to notice that there is a high expectation that many of these projects will be able to go much beyond what they are today. And when you start to look at that from like a 5 to 10 year horizon, it's really exciting to think that we are still extremely early in many of these asset classes. And as these start turning into small businesses and large companies, these are going to be extremely valuable assets that have tremendous amount of weight over a long term period.
So in DeFi, like the running thing for you and I was always, you make your community rich and you have your community forever, right? Like you make your early supporters wealthy, they'll stick around, they'll help build. With NFTs, it's I guess the same thing. Like you want to make your early supporters wealthy, but you also want to make sure that they're here to build. How important is speculation to you in an NFT community? And I'll tie that in with how important is it with the long term viability and build out of the actual community and project?
That's a really good question. I mean, thinking about it off the cuff, NFT communities are fundamentally different from like a DeFi protocol. I think the founding team can have a lot more ownership over the life cycle of that NFT project. I almost see the collectors as more community advocates more so than builders. So I would be less concerned about someone like Keyboard Monkey or 888 coming in and building a product or service for my community. My expectation for them is to help steward the ethos and sentiment of that project. So something like a Bored Ape Yacht Club, I would not expect them to go out and build a valuable product or service, but I would be really excited for them to host a meetup in a city, to go ahead and do a giveaway. And what you start to notice is that NFTs are much more about the diversity of holders than I think the repertoire of products and services. And the more sort of branding you can put behind it and the more likeness you can establish, I think that that's where success comes in. I mean, you think about like Stephen Curry just changed his profile picture to a Bored Ape. Chainsmokers just bought a Bored Ape. Cultural leaders are buying these exclusive NFTs, and we all know they have no expectation to build anything. It's a status symbol to them. And I think the onus and responsibility is on the core team and that top 1% of core contributors to make that valuable. And people like a Steph Curry or the chain smokers, their role is to passively hold the asset and keep it as their profile picture. And there should be no expectation for them to do anything else beyond that.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like, and I totally agree with you. I don't really expect like Steph Curry to build out, but it's kind of like all the building the community does, like getting Steph Curry to change their profile picture. Like that's a milestone for the community, right? Like that's a goal.
Absolutely. I think that all of these projects want to have cultural icons representing their NFT collections. The ones that have, you'll notice they're not doing it overnight. It's the result of months and then eventually years of hard work that result in that sort of moment or that sort of iconic like just moment in time. And so I think that what you're looking for as an NFT project today, don't focus on the primary sale. Don't worry about making a ton of money out of the gate. I'd say really optimize for longevity and secondary market. And if you can continue to deliver over a longer time horizon, people are going to pay attention. And especially in the wake of kind of 5 drops a day, I'm far less excited about, oh, we're raising this much money at this mint price, and far more excited about we've been around for 6 months and we now have 10,000 people in our Discord and they're still contributing day to day, despite the fact that there are a million other projects out there that they could be working on.
I guess I want to ask you, like, how do you judge the success of one of like the culture around a community outside of price, right? Because if you start to
Mm.
see culture take place, a really ingrained, strong community, obviously that NFT collection community will outperform. How do you judge that totally outside of price?
I look for the number of active contributors in a Discord server. I look for small things like the amount of people saying GM on a daily basis, and I look for the engagement and retention in a community. If I come to a Discord server and I see there's been no messages in general channel for 3 days, that's a signal to me that this asset is not as effective as it was at inception. If I go into a server and I see that there's 5 different working groups with people coordinating Zoom calls and saying GM every morning, I think that's extremely bullish, and that's an asset that I'm willing to invest my time and energy into.
It's a really good, I mean, that's a really killer metric. And to be honest, I don't think many people are doing that. I don't think people spend the time because I think people will look at a Discord and they won't be objective about it. They'll just be like, oh, there's a couple messages, we're active. But to your point, you're looking for working groups, you're looking for Zoom calls, you're looking for real building. And I don't know if, do you think a lot of people do what you do there? Or do you think people will just trick themselves into, something's active, just looking for anything?
People do not do that. I think for many people, their metric of success is going to the OpenSea collection and seeing what the floor price is. It's unfortunate, but this is the reality. It's very
You're
similar to
right.
just pulling up the token on CoinGecko. And so I think what I'm noticing now is that if you want to be a serious collector in this space, you need to go much deeper than looking at floor prices and sale history. You need to start looking at who these collectors are. And you need to go into those deep topics where deep collectors are talking about what they're buying and have a very strong, identification on trends that are happening in the market to make sure you're staying one step ahead of the curve.